It was just another Tuesday afternoon when Rachel pushed her shopping cart through the automatic doors of the neighborhood grocery store. She had her list crumpled in one hand and her phone in the other, mentally calculating how quickly she could get through her weekly shopping. The store was quieter than usual, with only a handful of other shoppers wandering the aisles. Soft music played overhead, and the fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune. Rachel headed straight for the produce section, tossing apples and bananas into her cart without much thought. She was tired from a long day at work and just wanted to get home, make dinner, and collapse on the couch. But as she turned toward the dairy aisle, something made her pause. At first, she thought she heard a cat meowing somewhere in the store, but then she realized it was something else entirely. It was the sound of a child crying. She stopped walking and listened more carefully. The crying was soft, muffled, like someone trying hard not to make noise but unable to hold it in. Rachel looked around, expecting to see a frustrated parent dealing with a tired toddler, but the aisle appeared empty. The sound was coming from somewhere near the back of the store, past the frozen foods section. Something in her gut told her to investigate. Maybe it was her motherly instincts, or maybe it was just human decency, but Rachel abandoned her cart and followed the sound. As she rounded the corner into the dairy section, she finally spotted him. A young boy, probably around 7 or 8 years old, was sitting on the cold tile floor with his knees pulled up to his chest. His face was buried in his arms, and his small shoulders shook with each sob. Rachel's heart immediately went out to him. She approached slowly, not wanting to startle him. When she got closer, she could see that his clothes looked worn and a bit too big for his thin frame. His sneakers had holes in them, and his hair looked like it hadn't been properly combed in days. But what struck her most was how scared he seemed, even before he noticed her standing there. She crouched down a few feet away from him and spoke in the gentlest voice she could manage. "Hey there, sweetheart. Are you okay? Are you lost?" The boy's head snapped up, and Rachel could see his tear-stained face clearly now. His eyes were red and puffy, and there was a look of pure terror in them that seemed far too intense for a simple case of getting separated from a parent. He stared at her for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether she was safe or dangerous. Rachel gave him what she hoped was a reassuring smile. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Rachel." "What's your name?" The boy wiped his nose with the back of his hand and glanced nervously toward the front of the store. When he looked back at Rachel, his voice came out as barely more than a whisper. They call me Danny." There was something odd about the way he said it. Not "my name is Danny" or "I'm Danny," but "they call me Danny." Rachel felt a small chill run down her spine, but she tried not to let her concern show on her face. "Danny, that's a nice name," she said, still keeping her voice calm and friendly. "Are you here with your mom or dad? Did you get separated from them?" The boy shook his head quickly, and fresh tears began rolling down his cheeks. I can't." He seemed unable to finish the sentence, his breath coming in short gasps. Rachel could see he was on the verge of a panic attack. She sat down on the floor next to him, not too close but close enough to show she wasn't going anywhere. "It's okay, Danny. Take your time. You're safe right now. Just breathe with me, okay? In and out, nice and slow." She exaggerated her own breathing, and after a few moments the boy began to mirror her. His breathing gradually became less frantic, though the tears continued to fall. Rachel noticed how he kept looking around, his eyes darting from one end of the aisle to the other like he was watching for something or someone. "Are you scared of someone?" Rachel asked gently. "Is someone here that you don't want to see?" The boy nodded slowly, his bottom lip trembling. Then in a voice so quiet Rachel had to lean in to hear him, he said something that made her blood run cold. "They call me Danny, but that's not my real name. My real name is different, but I'm not supposed to say it. She gets really angry if I say it." Rachel felt her heart start to pound. Every instinct she had was suddenly screaming that something was very, very wrong here. This wasn't just a lost kid. This was something else entirely. She pulled out her phone, trying to appear casual. "Danny, I'm going to call someone who can help us, okay? Someone who can make sure you're safe." The boy's eyes went wide with fear. No police." She said if I ever talked to police, bad things would happen. She said my real family doesn't want me anymore, and that's why I have to stay with her. Rachel's mind was racing now. Who was she? And why would someone tell a child that his family didn't want him? She decided not to call the police right away, not wanting to panic the boy further. But she did quickly text 911 with a brief message about a potentially endangered child at the grocery store. Okay. No police right now, Rachel lied, hoping to keep him calm. But Danny, can you tell me how long you've been here? In this store, I mean. I don't know, he said, wiping his eyes again. We came to get food. She doesn't usually let me come inside places. We mostly stay at the house. But today she needed to get lots of stuff and said I had to come because she couldn't carry it all. I'm not supposed to talk to anyone or look at anyone. But I had to use the bathroom really bad, and when I came out I couldn't find her. And then I got scared and didn't know what to do. Rachel listened carefully, noting every detail. A child who rarely went out in public. Someone who told him not to interact with others. Instructions about what his real name was. None of this felt right. Danny, I know this might be hard, but can you tell me what your real name is? The name you had before? The boy looked at her with those sad, frightened eyes. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. He was clearly wrestling with whether to trust her. Finally, he leaned in closer and whispered, Ethan. My name used to be Ethan. Before Rachel could respond, she heard footsteps at the other end of the aisle. The boy heard them too, and his whole body went rigid. He grabbed Rachel's arm, his small fingers digging in with surprising strength. That's her, he whispered urgently. Please don't let her take me, please. Rachel stood up quickly, positioning herself between the boy and whoever was approaching. Her heart was hammering in her chest, but she knew she had to stay calm. She had to protect this child, whoever he was and whatever was happening to him. She reached behind her and felt for the shelves, her fingers closing around a milk carton. She wasn't even thinking about why she grabbed it, just needing something to hold, something to ground herself in this surreal moment. And that's when everything changed. As she pulled the carton forward and her eyes happened to glance at the side panel, she saw something that made time seem to stop. There, printed in the small missing child section that she'd walked past 1,000 times without really looking, was a face. A young boy's face. And underneath it, in bold letters, Missing Ethan Cooper, age 6, last seen August 2022. Rachel looked at the photo, then at the boy behind her, then back at the photo. The boy in the picture was younger, maybe by a year or two, but there was no mistaking it. The same eyes, the same nose, the same slight gap between his front teeth that she could see when the boy behind her had briefly opened his mouth to speak. She was standing next to a missing child. A child who had been gone for over a year. A child whose face was on milk cartons in stores across the region, maybe across the country. The footsteps were getting closer now, and Rachel knew she had only seconds to make a decision. She quickly pulled out her phone again and managed to snap a photo of the milk carton before shoving it into her pocket. Then she turned to Ethan and crouched down one more time. Listen to me very carefully, she whispered. I believe you. I know who you are. And I promise you, I'm not going to let anyone hurt you. Do you trust me? The boy looked at her, and despite everything, despite all the fear and confusion, he slowly nodded his head. In that moment, Rachel made a silent promise to herself that she would do whatever it took to keep this child safe and get him back to where he belonged. Rachel's hands were shaking as she held the milk carton. She kept looking between the picture on the side and the frightened boy standing behind her. It was definitely him. The same soft brown eyes, the same small scar above his left eyebrow, the same way his ears stuck out just slightly. Ethan Cooper, the missing boy from the news over a year ago. She remembered when it happened. Everyone in town had been talking about it. A little boy vanished from a park while playing near his grandmother. 1 minute he was on the swings, the next he was gone. The whole community had searched for weeks. There were flyers everywhere, news reports every night, and vigils where people lit candles and prayed for his safe return. And then, as time passed, the story faded from the headlines. Life moved on for everyone except the family still looking for their child. But here he was. Right here in a grocery store, scared and crying, being called by a different name. Rachel's mind was spinning with questions. Who was this woman Ethan was so afraid of? How had she kept him hidden for so long? And more importantly, how was Rachel going to get him out of here safely? The footsteps were getting louder now. Rachel could hear the squeak of shopping cart wheels on the linoleum floor. She took a deep breath and tried to think clearly. She had already texted the police, but they weren't here yet. She needed to stall, to buy time. She kept the milk carton in her hand, making sure the missing child photo was facing away from whoever was coming. Then she placed her other hand on Ethan's shoulder, feeling him trembling beneath her touch. Stay right behind me, she whispered to him. Don't say anything unless I tell you to. Ethan nodded, his eyes wide with fear. He pressed closer to Rachel's legs, making himself as small as possible. A moment later, a woman appeared at the end of the aisle. She was probably in her mid-40s with dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. She wore plain jeans and a gray sweater. Nothing that would make her stand out in a crowd. But her eyes, there was something off about her eyes. They were hard and cold as they scanned the aisle. And when they landed on Ethan, Rachel saw something flash across her face. Anger, maybe, or fear, or both. The woman's expression quickly changed to one of concern as she rushed forward. Danny, oh my goodness, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you. She reached out for Ethan, but Rachel instinctively stepped more fully in front of him, blocking her path. The woman's hand froze in midair and her eyes narrowed as they focused on Rachel. I'm sorry, the woman said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. He's my son. He has a tendency to wander off. Thank you for watching him, but we need to go now. Rachel felt Ethan's fingers grip the back of her shirt tightly. He was shaking even harder now, and she could hear his ragged breathing. Every fiber of her being was telling her not to let this woman take him. He seemed pretty upset, Rachel said, trying to keep her voice steady and casual. I think maybe we should wait for store security, just to make sure everything's okay. The woman's smile faltered for just a second. That's really not necessary. He gets confused sometimes. He has some special needs, and crowds make him anxious. I'm his mother, and I know what's best for him. She's not my mom, Ethan suddenly whispered from behind Rachel. His voice was so quiet that Rachel almost didn't hear it, but the woman definitely did. The woman's face changed completely. The fake warmth disappeared, replaced by something much darker. Danny, don't be silly. Of course I'm your mother. Now come here right now. Her voice had an edge to it now, a barely controlled anger that made Rachel's skin crawl. This was not a mother worried about her child. This was someone who was used to being obeyed and was getting increasingly frustrated that her control was slipping. Rachel tightened her grip on the milk carton, and without really thinking about it, she shifted it so the missing child poster was facing forward. She wanted to see the woman's reaction. The change was instant and dramatic. The woman's eyes locked onto the poster, and all the color drained from her face. For a split second, Rachel saw pure panic in her expression. The woman knew exactly what was on that carton, and she knew that Rachel had seen it too. Listen, the woman said, her voice now low and dangerous. I don't know what you think is going on here, but you need to mind your own business. That boy is coming with me right now. She took a step forward, and Rachel had to fight the urge to back away. Instead, she stood her ground, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. I don't think so, Rachel said, surprised by how firm her own voice sounded. I think we're going to wait right here. The woman's jaw clenched. You have no idea what you're doing. You're going to ruin everything. Ruin what exactly? Rachel asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Behind her, Ethan was crying again, his quiet sobs breaking Rachel's heart. She wanted to turn around and comfort him, but she didn't dare take her eyes off the woman in front of her. The woman opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, Rachel heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Sirens. Faint at first, but growing louder. The police were almost here. The woman heard them too. Her eyes widened, and she looked toward the front of the store, then back at Rachel and Ethan. Rachel could practically see the calculations happening in her head. Should she run? Should she try to grab the boy? Should she try to talk her way out of this? You called the cops? The woman hissed. You stupid interfering... I'd be very careful what you say next, Rachel interrupted, her phone now visible in her hand. Because I've been recording this entire conversation. It was a lie, but the woman didn't know that. Rachel watched as uncertainty flickered across her face. The sirens were louder now, very close. Rachel could see the blue and red lights flashing through the store windows. The woman saw them too, and something seemed to break inside her. Her shoulders sagged, and suddenly she looked older, more tired. You don't understand, she said, and for the first time, there was genuine emotion in her voice. I saved him. His family didn't deserve him. They didn't watch him carefully enough. They let him play in that park with no supervision. What kind of parents do that? Rachel felt a chill run through her. This woman actually believed what she was saying. She had convinced herself that kidnapping a child was somehow an act of rescue. That's not your decision to make, Rachel said quietly. He has parents who love him. They've been looking for him every single day. They didn't love him enough to keep him safe, the woman shot back, her voice rising. I gave him a home. I fed him, clothed him, taught him. He's mine now. Danny is my son. My name is Ethan. The boy's voice came from behind Rachel, stronger now. My name is Ethan Cooper, and you stole me. You lied to me. You said my family was dead, but they're not, are they? The woman's face crumpled. Danny, no, you don't understand. Don't call me that. Ethan's voice cracked. That's not my name. You took me from the park. You said my mom sent you to get me because she was hurt. But she wasn't hurt, was she? You lied about everything. Rachel felt tears stinging her own eyes as she listened to the pain in Ethan's voice. How long had this poor child been living with those lies? How many nights had he cried himself to sleep thinking his family had abandoned him? The automatic doors at the front of the store burst open, and suddenly there were police officers rushing down the aisles. Rachel had never been so relieved to see anyone in her life. Over here, she called out, waving one arm while keeping herself between Ethan and the woman. Two officers approached quickly, their hands resting on their holsters. A third officer, a woman with kind eyes, came straight to Rachel and Ethan. Are you the one who called? The female officer asked Rachel. Yes, I texted. This boy. Rachel gestured behind her. His name is Ethan Cooper. He's been missing for over a year. His picture is on this milk carton. She held up the carton so the officer could see. The officer's eyes widened as she looked at the poster. Then at Ethan. She immediately got on her radio, calling for backup and what sounded like a supervisor. The other two officers were now talking to the woman who had her hands up and was crying. Rachel couldn't hear what she was saying, but she looked defeated, broken. The female officer knelt down to Ethan's level. Hi there, sweetheart. My name is Officer Chen. Can you tell me your name? Ethan looked at Rachel, who gave him an encouraging nod. He took a shaky breath and said, My real name is Ethan Cooper. I've been missing. She took me from the park when I was with my grandma. She said my mom was hurt, but I don't think that was true. Officer Chen's expression was gentle but serious. Ethan, you are so brave for telling me this. We're going to make sure you're safe now, okay? And we're going to find your family. Are they really alive? Ethan asked, his voice small and hopeful. She said they didn't want me anymore. She said they forgot about me. Oh, honey, no, Officer Chen said, her own voice thick with emotion. Your family has never stopped looking for you. Not for one single day. Ethan's face crumpled and he started crying harder than before, but this time it sounded different. It sounded like relief mixed with grief, like the weight of a year's worth of lies was finally lifting off his small shoulders. Rachel felt her own tears falling now. She had done it. She had helped save this child. When she had walked into this grocery store an hour ago, she never could have imagined this would happen. The grocery store had transformed into something resembling a crime scene. Yellow police tape blocked off the dairy aisle where everything had unfolded. More officers had arrived, along with detectives in plain clothes and someone from Child Protective Services. Curious shoppers gathered at a distance, craning their necks to see what was happening, whispering to each other and pulling out their phones to record. Rachel stood off to the side with Officer Chen, watching as other officers led the woman away in handcuffs. The woman, who Rachel now knew was named Linda Patterson, kept looking back at Ethan with an expression that was hard to read. Was it regret? Desperation? Or did she still somehow believe she had done the right thing? Ethan sat on a chair that someone had brought from the store's break room. He looked so small and fragile, wrapped in a blanket that one of the officers had given him even though it wasn't cold. A female detective with gray-streaked hair was sitting next to him, speaking to him in low, gentle tones. Rachel couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could see Ethan nodding occasionally, wiping his eyes, and sometimes pointing or gesturing as he explained things. You did an amazing thing today, Officer Chen said to Rachel. Most people would have just walked past a crying kid, assumed it was a normal tantrum or that a parent was nearby. Rachel shook her head. I almost did walk past, but something just felt wrong. And when he said that thing about they call me Danny instead of my name is Danny, it just triggered something in my head. That's good instinct, the officer replied. The fact that you noticed that small detail and trusted your gut probably saved that boy's life, or at least saved him from years more of trauma. Rachel looked over at Ethan again. What happens to him now? Well, first we need to verify his identity beyond any doubt. Though honestly, looking at him and that milk carton, there's no question in my mind. We've already contacted the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and they're pulling up his case file as we speak. Then we'll need to contact his family. Do you know where they are? Are they still in the area? Officer Chen nodded. According to what I'm hearing over the radio, yes. They never moved. They stayed in the same house, kept his room exactly the way it was, hoping he'd come home one day. The detective is going to have someone go to their house right now to bring them here. Rachel felt her throat tighten with emotion. They must be. I can't even imagine what they've been going through. The worst nightmare any parent could have, Officer Chen agreed. But today, that nightmare finally ends. A detective approached them, a tall man with tired eyes who introduced himself as Detective Morris. Ms. Henderson, I'm going to need to get a full statement from you about everything that happened today. Of course, Rachel said. Whatever you need. But first, I wanted to thank you. What you did took courage. That woman could have become violent. You put yourself at risk to protect a child you didn't even know. Rachel glanced back at Ethan. I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Not when I knew something was wrong. Detective Morris pulled out a notebook. Walk me through everything, from the moment you first heard him crying. For the next 20 minutes, Rachel recounted every detail she could remember. How she had found Ethan crying in the dairy aisle. The odd way he had phrased things about his name. His fear of the woman. The moment she had seen his face on the milk carton and realized who he really was. The confrontation with Linda. Everything. The detective took careful notes, occasionally asking questions to clarify specific points. When Rachel mentioned that she had lied about recording the conversation with Linda, Detective Morris actually smiled slightly. Quick thinking, he said. That probably prevented her from trying to grab the boy and run. Can I ask you something? Rachel said. How did she keep him hidden for so long? There must have been people looking for him. How did no one recognize him? Detective Morris sighed. We're still piecing it together, but from what Ethan is telling Detective Riley over there, it sounds like she kept him very isolated. She lived in a rural area, homeschooled him, rarely took him out in public. She dyed his hair darker and told him a different name. She also told him that his real family had died or didn't want him anymore, which is a common tactic kidnappers use to make children compliant. They destroy the child's hope of going home. Rachel felt sick to her stomach. That's horrible, it is. But you know what? That little boy never completely gave up hope. Even after all this time, even believing those lies, some part of him knew something wasn't right. That's why he ran when he got the chance today. That's why he told you his real name. He was brave enough to trust you and smart enough to know he needed help. Over by the chairs, Detective Riley stood up and walked over to join them. She looked emotionally drained. How's he doing? Officer Chen asked. As well as can be expected, Detective Riley said. He's scared, confused, and processing a lot of heavy information. But he's also clearly relieved. He's been carrying this weight alone for so long. What did he tell you? Detective Morris asked. Detective Riley flipped open her own notebook. He says Linda approached him at the park where he was playing with his grandmother. She told him his mother had been in a car accident and was asking for him at the hospital. She said his grandmother had sent her to pick him up quickly. He was only 6, scared about his mom, so he went with her without question. By the time he realized something was wrong, she had already driven him far away from the park. Smart manipulation, Morris said grimly. She knew exactly what to say to get a scared kid to comply. It gets worse, Riley continued. She took him to a house in a rural area, about 2 hours from here. She homeschooled him, kept him inside most of the time. She told him his family had been killed in that car accident. Later, when he got older and started asking more questions, she changed the story. Said his family had given him up because they didn't love him enough. She was very careful about controlling what information he had access to. No TV, no internet, no contact with other kids. Rachel's hands clenched into fists. How could someone do that to a child? We're looking into her background now, Morris said. Initial reports suggest she lost her own son several years ago. Different circumstances, but it seems she never recovered from that loss. She may have convinced herself that taking Ethan was somehow saving him, or replacing the child she lost. That doesn't excuse what she did, Rachel said firmly. No, it absolutely doesn't, Morris agreed. She'll be facing serious charges. Kidnapping, child endangerment, false imprisonment. She's going away for a very long time. A commotion at the front of the store made everyone turn. More police officers were entering, and with them were two people who looked like they'd been running. A man and a woman, both in their mid-30s, both with expressions of desperate hope and terror. "That's them," Detective Riley said quietly. "That's Jennifer and Michael Cooper, Ethan's parents." Rachel watched as the couple spotted the detective and rushed over. Their eyes were already scanning the area, searching frantically. And then Michael Cooper saw him. Saw his son sitting on that chair with a blanket around his shoulders. "Ethan?" he said, his voice breaking on the name. "Ethan!" Jennifer Cooper let out a sound that Rachel would never forget as long as she lived. It was somewhere between a sob and a scream, a sound of pure emotion that couldn't be contained. Both parents started moving toward their son, but Detective Riley gently intercepted them. "Wait, please," she said kindly but firmly. "I know you want to run to him, but we need to do this carefully. He's been through significant trauma. He's been told for over a year that you were dead, or that you didn't want him. We need to help him understand that those were lies." Jennifer was crying so hard she could barely speak. "He thinks we're dead. He thinks we didn't want him." "That's what he was told," Riley confirmed. "But he's starting to understand the truth now. Just give us a moment to prepare him, okay?" Michael had his arm around his wife, and they both looked like they might collapse from the weight of their emotions. Rachel found herself crying too, unable to look away from this heartbreaking scene. Detective Riley walked back over to Ethan. Rachel couldn't hear what she was saying, but she saw Ethan's head snap up, saw his eyes go wide. The detective gestured toward where his parents stood, and Ethan looked in that direction. The moment he saw them, everything changed. His face went through so many emotions so quickly: confusion, disbelief, recognition, hope, and then pure joy. He stood up so fast the blanket fell to the floor. "Mom?" he said, his voice small and uncertain. "Dad?" That was all it took. Jennifer and Michael rushed forward, and Ethan met them halfway. The three of them collided in the middle of that grocery store aisle, holding each other so tightly it looked like they would never let go. All three were crying, saying each other's names over and over like prayers. "You're alive," Ethan kept saying. "You're alive. I thought you were gone. I thought you didn't want me." "Never," Jennifer sobbed, kissing his face, his hair, his hands. "Never, never, never. We looked for you every single day. We never stopped. We never gave up. We love you so much." Michael was crying so hard he couldn't speak at first. He just held his son, one hand on his head, the other wrapped around him as if trying to convince himself this was real. Rachel watched through her own tears, feeling like she was witnessing something sacred. This was what love looked like. This was what hope rewarded looked like. This was a family that had been shattered, finding their missing piece. The reunion lasted for several minutes before the detectives gently suggested they move to a more private location. The Cooper family was taken to a quiet room in the back of the store, away from the cameras and curious onlookers. Rachel was asked to stay as well, since her statement wasn't complete, and they wanted Ethan to have familiar faces around him during this overwhelming time. As they walked through the store, Ethan held both his parents' hands so tightly his knuckles were white. He kept looking up at them, as if checking to make sure they were still there, that this wasn't a dream. Jennifer hadn't stopped touching him either, her hand constantly moving to his hair, his shoulder, his cheek, like she needed the physical contact to believe he was real. The store manager had offered his office, and someone had brought in extra chairs. The space was cramped with so many people, but no one seemed to mind. Ethan sat between his parents on a small couch, still holding their hands. Detective Riley sat across from them, with Detective Morris standing nearby. Rachel took a chair in the corner, trying to stay out of the way, but available if needed. "I know this is overwhelming," Detective Riley began gently, "but we need to understand what happened, both for the criminal case against Linda Patterson and to help Ethan get the support he needs going forward. Ethan has already told us some things, but now that you're here, Mr. and Mrs. Cooper, I'd like to go through the timeline of what happened that day." Michael nodded, his arm wrapped protectively around his son. "Whatever you need. Let's start with the day Ethan disappeared. Can you walk me through what happened?" Jennifer took a shaky breath. "It was August 15th, 2022, a Monday. I had to work that day and Michael was out of town on business. So Ethan was with my mother, his grandmother, at Riverside Park. They went there all the time. It was always safe. There were always other families around. What time did they arrive at the park? Riley asked, taking notes. Around 10 in the morning, Jennifer continued. My mom called me at work around 10:30, completely hysterical. She said Ethan had been playing on the swings and she had sat down on a bench about 20 feet away where she could see him. She looked down at her phone for just a minute to answer a text from me, and when she looked up, he was gone. Michael's jaw clenched. We've gone over this 1,000 times, wondering what we could have done differently. But the truth is, she wasn't being negligent. She was watching him. It only took seconds. Ethan squeezed his mother's hand. It wasn't Grandma's fault, he said quietly. The lady was really sneaky. She came up to me while I was on the swings and said you were in a car accident, Mom. She said you were asking for me and that Grandma sent her to get me because Grandma had to stay and watch some other kids. I was so scared about you that I just went with her. Did she seem familiar to you at all? Detective Morris asked. Had you ever seen her before? Ethan shook his head. No, never. But she knew my name and she knew my mom's name and she said Grandma sent her, so I believed her. She must have been watching you, Riley said. Following you, learning your routine, learning names. This was planned, but why? Jennifer asked, her voice breaking. Why our son? Why any child? What kind of person does something like this? We're still investigating her background, Morris said. But what we know so far paints a picture of someone who was deeply troubled. Linda Patterson lost her son 7 years ago in a drowning accident. He was 5 years old. According to neighbors we've already spoken to, she never recovered from that loss. She became increasingly isolated, paranoid. She blamed herself for his death. So she tried to replace him by stealing someone else's child? Michael's voice was hard with anger. It appears that way, Morris confirmed. In her mind, she may have genuinely believed she was saving Ethan, giving him a better life. That doesn't excuse her actions, but it helps us understand her psychological state. Detective Riley turned back to Ethan. Can you tell us about where she took you? The house you lived in? Ethan bit his lip and Rachel could see him struggling with the memories. Jennifer pulled him closer. It's okay, sweetheart, she whispered. You're safe now. But they need to know so they can make sure she can't hurt anyone else. Ethan nodded slowly. It was a house in the woods. I don't know exactly where. It took a long time to drive there from the park. She kept telling me we were going to the hospital to see Mom, but we never got there. Eventually, I fell asleep in the car, and when I woke up, we were at this house I'd never seen before. What happened when you got there? Riley asked gently. She told me we had to wait for news about my mom. She gave me food and said I should rest. I was really scared and confused. I kept asking to call my dad or my grandma, but she said all the phone lines were down because of the accident. Then, Ethan's voice wavered. Then she sat me down and told me you were both dead. She said the accident was really bad and that everyone in our family was gone except her. She said she was a distant aunt and now she had to take care of me. Jennifer let out a choked sob and pulled Ethan even closer, burying her face in his hair. Did you believe her? Morris asked. At first, yes, Ethan admitted. I was only 6. I didn't understand how she could be lying about something like that. And she seemed really sad when she told me, like she was crying too, so I thought it must be true. When did you start to doubt her? After a few months, I started asking questions. Like, why couldn't we go see where you were buried? Why didn't I remember this aunt from before? Why didn't we have any pictures of you? She'd get really angry when I asked questions. She said I was being ungrateful, that she'd saved me from being put in foster care with strangers. Did she ever hurt you? Riley asked carefully. Physically, I mean? Ethan hesitated. Not really. She never hit me or anything. But she would lock me in my room sometimes when I made her angry. And she didn't give me much food when she was mad. She said I had to earn privileges by being a good boy and not asking questions. Rachel felt her stomach turn. The isolation, the manipulation, the control, it was all a form of abuse, even if it hadn't left physical scars. What changed? Morris asked. What made her decide to bring you to the store today? She usually goes shopping by herself, Ethan explained. But today she needed to get a lot of stuff and her car wasn't working right. She said she needed my help carrying things. I think she also thought enough time had passed that it was safe, that no one would recognize me. She made me dye my hair darker and she'd been calling me Danny for so long that I almost forgot my real name was Ethan. But you didn't forget completely, Rachel said softly from her corner. Everyone turned to look at her. When I asked your name, you said they call me Danny, not my name is Danny. Some part of you remembered who you really were. Ethan looked at her and gave a small, sad smile. I used to whisper my real name to myself at night so I wouldn't forget. Ethan Cooper. Sometimes I'd pretend I could remember what you looked like, he said to his parents. But after a while, your faces got blurry in my mind. That scared me more than anything. You remembered enough, Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. You remembered enough to tell Rachel the truth when it mattered. Detective Riley closed her notebook. Ethan, you are one of the bravest kids I've ever met. What you survived, how you kept yourself together, how you knew to ask for help when you got the chance, that takes incredible strength. What happens now? Jennifer asked. Can we take him home? We'll need to do a medical evaluation first, Riley said. Just to make sure he's healthy and to document his condition. Then yes, you can take him home. We'll need to schedule some follow-up interviews, and we'll be recommending therapy to help Ethan process everything he's been through. But after today, he's back with his family where he belongs. Michael looked at Rachel. We haven't even properly thanked you yet. You saved our son. You gave us our family back. Rachel shook her head, tears streaming down her face again. I just did what anyone would do. No, Jennifer said firmly. Most people would have walked away. Most people would have assumed everything was fine. You trusted your instincts, you put yourself at risk, and you didn't give up even when that woman tried to take him. We can never repay you for that. Before Rachel could respond, Ethan got up from the couch and walked over to her. Without saying a word, he wrapped his arms around her in a tight hug. Rachel hugged him back, feeling the weight of everything he'd been through in that small embrace. Thank you for believing me, Ethan whispered. Thank you for not letting her take me again. Always, Rachel whispered back. I'll always believe you. As they prepared to leave for the hospital, Detective Morris pulled Rachel aside. I wanted you to know that we're going to be bringing charges against Linda Patterson for kidnapping, false imprisonment, child endangerment, and several other offenses. With Ethan's testimony and the evidence we've gathered, she's looking at spending the rest of her life in prison. Good, Rachel said simply. What she did to that child, to that family, is unforgivable. Agreed. But today had a happy ending because of you. You should be proud of that. Rachel watched as the Cooper family prepared to leave. Ethan was between his parents again, holding their hands, and despite everything he'd been through, there was a lightness to his expression that hadn't been there before. The weight of Linda's lies was finally lifting. 3 weeks had passed since that day in the grocery store. Rachel was back at work trying to settle into her normal routine, but nothing felt quite the same. How could it? She had helped rescue a missing child. She had stood between a kidnapper and her victim. She had witnessed a family torn apart by tragedy finally coming back together. Those kinds of experiences change a person. The story had made national news within hours. Missing child found after 14 months read the headlines. Rachel's face was everywhere, though she had tried to avoid most of the media attention. She had given one press conference at the police department's request, where she had simply told the story of what happened and urged people to always trust their instincts when something feels wrong. But it was the private moments that stuck with her most. The image of Ethan's face when he saw his parents, the sound of Jennifer Cooper's cry of relief and joy, the way the three of them had held each other like they would never let go. Those memories played in Rachel's mind constantly. She was at her desk trying to focus on work emails when her phone buzzed. It was a text from Jennifer Cooper. Over the past 3 weeks, they had stayed in touch. Jennifer had been sending regular updates about Ethan's progress, and they had become unlikely friends through this shared experience. The text read, Hi, Rachel. We were wondering if you'd like to come over for dinner this Friday. Ethan has been asking about you, and we'd really love to see you. No pressure if you're too busy, but we'd love to have you. Rachel smiled and immediately texted back, I'd love to come. Thank you for inviting me. Friday evening arrived cool and crisp, with leaves beginning to turn colors. Rachel drove to the address Jennifer had given her, a modest house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. As she pulled up to the curb, she saw a small bike lying in the driveway and a basketball hoop above the garage. Normal suburban family life. Before she could even get out of her car, the front door burst open and Ethan came running out. He looked different than he had that day in the store. His hair was back to its natural lighter brown color. He was wearing clean clothes that fit him properly. But most importantly, he was smiling. Really genuinely smiling. Rachel, he called out, waving. You came. She got out of the car and found herself swept up in a hug from this child. who had somehow become so important to her in such a short time. "Of course I came," she said, hugging him back. "I wouldn't miss it." Jennifer and Michael appeared in the doorway, both smiling warmly. Jennifer looked like a completely different person than the devastated woman Rachel had seen in that grocery store. There was life in her eyes again, color in her cheeks. She looked like someone who could finally breathe after holding her breath for 14 months. Come in," Jennifer said, ushering Rachel inside. "Thank you so much for coming." The house was exactly what Rachel had expected. Warm, lived in, full of love. There were family photos everywhere, including many of Ethan from before he went missing. But there were also newer photos now, ones taken in the past 3 weeks. The Cooper family was building new memories as quickly as they could. One photo in particular caught Rachel's eye. It was from what looked like Ethan's first night home. He was asleep on the couch, curled up between his parents, all three of them obviously exhausted. Someone had draped a blanket over them, and the photo captured such raw emotion that Rachel felt her throat tighten. "My mom took that," Jennifer said softly, noticing what Rachel was looking at. "None of us could bear to be apart that first night. We all fell asleep in the living room together. I think we were all afraid that if we went to separate rooms, this would turn out to be a dream." "How is your mother doing?" Rachel asked. "I know she must have been carrying a lot of guilt." Jennifer nodded. "She was devastated. She blamed herself for years, even though we kept telling her it wasn't her fault. When Ethan came home, one of the first things he did was tell her it wasn't her fault, that the woman tricked him. I think that helped her start to heal, too." Michael called them into the dining room where he had prepared a feast. "I hope you're hungry," he said to Rachel. "I might have gone a bit overboard." "He's been cooking all day," Ethan said, grinning. "He does that now. He says he has years of meals to make up for." They sat down to eat, and the conversation flowed easily. Rachel learned that Michael had taken a leave from his job to spend time with Ethan. Jennifer was working reduced hours. They were both committed to being present for their son as he readjusted to his life. "How are you doing?" Rachel asked Ethan gently. "Really doing?" Ethan thought about it for a moment, pushing his mashed potatoes around his plate. "It's weird," he admitted. "Good weird, but still weird. I'm happy to be home. I love my mom and dad so much. But sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and forget where I am, or I worry that this isn't real." Jennifer reached over and squeezed his hand. "That's completely normal, sweetheart. The therapist said it's going to take time. We've been seeing a really good child psychologist," Michael explained to Rachel. "She specializes in trauma and kidnapping cases. She's been amazing with Ethan." "What does she say about his progress?" Rachel asked. "That he's doing remarkably well, all things considered," Jennifer said. "She thinks his resilience is partly due to the fact that he held on to his identity, even when Linda was trying to erase it. And also because he found a way to escape when he had the chance. That sense of agency, of having some control, is really important for recovery." "I still have nightmares sometimes," Ethan said quietly, "about being back in that house. About her locking me in my room." Rachel felt her heart break a little. "That makes sense. You went through something really scary. But I also have good dreams now," Ethan added, brightening. "I dream about playing basketball with Dad, or baking with Mom, or just being here at home. Those dreams are new." After dinner, Ethan asked if he could show Rachel his room. As they climbed the stairs, Jennifer whispered, "Fair warning, we kept it exactly the way it was when he disappeared. We couldn't bring ourselves to change anything." Ethan's room was like a time capsule. Posters of superheroes on the walls. A shelf full of action figures and toy cars. A bed with a spaceship-themed comforter. The only new additions were some recent drawings and a few new books. "This is weird for me too," Ethan admitted, looking around. "I'm 7 now, almost 8. But this room is decorated for a 6-year-old. I don't want to hurt Mom and Dad's feelings by asking to change it, though." "I think you should talk to them about it," Rachel said. "They want you to be happy. If you want to redecorate to make this space feel like yours again, I think they'd understand." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe. Can I show you something?" He pulled a shoebox out from under his bed and opened it. Inside were dozens of small pieces of paper, each with the same 3 words written on them. Ethan Cooper. Ethan Cooper. Ethan Cooper. "I wrote these when I lived with her," Ethan explained. "Every night before bed, I'd write my real name over and over again on whatever paper I could find. Then I'd hide them in this box I found in the closet. It was my way of not forgetting who I was. Rachel felt tears welling up again. The strength of this child, the determination to hold on to his identity despite everything, it was incredible. "You were so brave," she said. "You never gave up." "I learned that from my parents," Ethan said simply. "They never gave up either. Even though I thought they were dead, they never stopped looking for me. The detective told me they searched every day. My dad drove all over following any lead. My mom posted on social media every single day. They kept my story alive." They went back downstairs where Jennifer had made coffee and hot chocolate. As they sat in the living room, Michael turned to Rachel. "We wanted to tell you something," he said. "We've established a foundation in your honor. It's called the Rachel Henderson Second Chance Foundation. We're using it to raise awareness about missing children and to support families going through what we went through." Rachel was stunned. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, we did," Jennifer said firmly. "You gave us our second chance. You gave Ethan his life back. We want to help other families have the same hope, the same happy ending. We're also working with the grocery store chain," Michael added. "They're expanding their missing children program. They're going to put photos on more products and train their employees to recognize signs of distressed children. The CEO said your story inspired them to do more." Rachel didn't know what to say. She had just done what felt right in the moment, and now it was rippling out into something bigger. "There's something else," Jennifer said, pulling out a folder. "The police finished their investigation into Linda Patterson. She's been formally charged with first-degree kidnapping, false imprisonment, child abuse, and several other crimes. The prosecutor is confident she'll spend the rest of her life in prison." "Good," Rachel said simply. "They also found something at her house," Michael continued. "A journal where she had been planning this for months. She had been watching multiple families, following different children. Ethan wasn't random. She chose him specifically because she thought he looked like her son who died." Rachel felt sick. "So if it hadn't been Ethan, it would have been another child," Jennifer finished. "Which is why what you did was so important. You didn't just save our son. You potentially saved other children from becoming her next victim." As the evening drew to a close, Ethan gave Rachel another long hug. "Will you come back and visit again?" he asked. "Absolutely," Rachel promised. "As often as you want." "Good, because you're part of our family now. You saved me, which means you're stuck with us." Rachel laughed, wiping away tears. "I can't think of a better family to be stuck with."